Well, again, Mr. Bannon is angry, and rightfully so. And I'm not saying we have to just sing "Kumbaya" and hold hands. What I'm saying is we actually should disagree. I think Charlie represented that better than anyone. Charlie said some very inflammatory things, and in some corners of the web, that's all people have heard. But he also said some other things about forgiveness. He said some amazing things about when things get dark, putting down our phones, reading scripture, going to church. Talking to our neighbors, he said that we have to engage, and that's what I appreciate most about Charlie Kirk. Said if we don't keep talking, that's when the violence starts. Look, there are conflict entrepreneurs out there who benefit from radicalizing us, and I'm not one of those. I don't know that that's particularly helpful, but he is right at this. We need to find out how this happened, and we need to stop it from happening.
Grace and peace, everybody. I wanted to, as we're looking at this first full week after what happened on past Wednesday, and I wanted to just take a second to give a shout out and a hat tip to the governor of Utah, who I believe had a very smart and measured response. He was on the War Room with Dana somebody, I forgot, and yesterday, and that's what he said about what he called conflict entrepreneurs. And I just thought that was so spot on the money. There are people right now who are making money. As the scriptures say, they're making merchandise of you because you're offended, because you're upset, because you're angry. And they're using that to steer you in a direction that will capitalize on their money, their income. You know it. And this is on both sides of the argument. There's the person on the right who wants to round up everybody who has a conflicting view or difference of opinion. There's the people on the left saying, well, yeah, it's freedom of speech, but he got what he deserved. There's all of these people that are trying to rally you up and rile you and me up and get us upset and fighting with one another so that they can continue to generate and improve their financial status. And I just thought that was an excellent point. I want to bring in the actual
again, Mr. Bannon
Let's watch
is
it
angry,
again, I guess,
and rightfully so. And I'm not saying we have to just sing "Kumbaya" and hold hands. What I'm saying is we actually should disagree. I think Charlie represented that better than anyone. Charlie said some very inflammatory things, and in some corners of the web, that's all people have heard. But he also said some other things about forgiveness. He said some amazing things about when things get dark, putting down our phones, reading scripture, going to church, talking to our neighbors. He said that we have to engage, and that's what I appreciate most about Charlie Kirk. Said if we don't keep talking, that's when the violence starts. Look, there are conflict entrepreneurs out there who benefit from radicalizing us, and I'm not one of those. I don't know that that's particularly helpful, but he is right at this. We need to find out how this happened, and we need to stop it from happening.
Yeah, shout out again. I just thought that was such a smart approach to dealing with this situation. And I left the link to the article that I'm about to read in the chat or in the comments. So please go check it out. Definitely look into it yourself. So let's just go real quick. We're going to jump over to CNN very quickly. Here we go. And Governor Spencer Cox message to the disagree better faces its biggest test. Utah Governor Spencer Cox's campaign to turn down the national political temperature has long stood out as a rarity in the Republican Party led by President Donald Trump. But Cox's commanding role as the nation grapples with the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk gives his calls to end the cycle of violent division a new prominence. And I'm right there with him. I agree with him 100%. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I think I can. Maybe I can't. I think it's already big enough. All right. I digress. It also laid bare a sharp divide within the GOP over the way forward, even as prominent Democrats and some Republicans praised Cox's performance before a national audience on Friday. Cox said Americans face a decision. Is this the end of a dark chapter in our history or or the beginning? I think that's a good question. Among those whom count Cox as a close friend is Wes Moore, Maryland's Democrat governor. Moore said he thought Cox had shown the importance of being authentic. Okay, shout out. Spencer Cox is Spencer Cox, Moore told CNN on Friday, and he doesn't change depending on who the audience is, and he doesn't change depending on who he's standing in front of. And that's one of the things I love about him most. He's just a deeply good human being, he added, and I'm thankful that in this moment of real tension in our country, Spencer is helping to lead us through. I think that's admirable. I'll give him that for sure. No question there whatsoever. Cox implored the country to dedicate themselves to end the cycle of violent division, echoing his longstanding calls for civility in a national political discourse and urging people to disagree better. I don't see any problem with that. The fact that we can disagree and our disagreements result in somebody's life being lost, that's something we got to look at. That's not a good look for us as humans. But let's keep going. I desperately call on every American, Republican, Democrat, liberal, progressive, conservative, MAGA, all of us to please follow what Charlie taught me, Cox said on Friday, sharing a lesson he recounted from Kirk. Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. I mean, that's scripture. That's scripture right there. While the governor has built a strong conservative record, he has faced at times sharp criticism from Trump-aligned Republicans. The disconnect raises the question of whether there's truly an audience inside the GOP for this type of message Cox has sought to deliver. Okay, I'm going to push back here. Just because a message of working with other people, listening to other people, to me personally, maybe it's just the way that Spencer Cox says it. To me, I don't think that this message disagrees with anything that's Republican or GOP. I don't think any of it disagrees. I think it might be just key people that don't rock with it or maybe want to go in a different direction. But I think they might be the conflict entrepreneurs that we were talking about a moment ago. In 2022, as Cox was about to veto a ban on transgender youth athletes playing in girls' sports, Kirk tweeted, Utah Governor Spencer Cox should be expelled from the Republican Party. Okay. Cox wrote in his message to legislative leaders that he had tried to err on the side of kindness, mercy, and compassion. Still, the legislature overrode his veto, and rightly so. I don't understand why that would be a difficult thing to rock with. But I would address Spencer about the kindness, mercy, and compassion argument, because I think that he's erring on the side of kindness, mercy, and compassion toward people that are ultimately taking advantage of young girls, aka boys that are playing in girl sports. So maybe you need to show kindness, mercy, and compassion to the actual girls, not the ones that are cosplaying as girls. Just my thought, just something to bring up. Steve Bannon, the Kirk and Trump ally, alluded to that veto in his War Room podcast Friday and called Cox a governor who also known to think to be particularly obnoxious. Let me say it again. A governor who's also known, I think, to be particularly obnoxious. We don't need a governor to step up and give us basically a political pep talk and a rally. Let's just all come together, Bannon said. There has to be a place where no matter what, we can disagree vehemently, but there needs to be like some lines, some rules of engagement, as somebody would say, some rules of engagement as it relates to a disagreeable content or disagreeable verbal conflict and such like that. Because what we saw on Wednesday should never be the answer. That's not the answer. So however we parse it out, whatever I think about why you disagree with me or whatnot, physical violence shouldn't be the answer. Like that part needs to be the agreed upon, no matter what we do here, arguing right here. Again, Bannon calling Cox obnoxious, that's fine. Cox doesn't have the right to punch Bannon, and Bannon shouldn't come off the top rope on Cox. That's just simple. We can still disagree. He can say he's obnoxious. That's perfectly fine. We don't want to be conflict entrepreneurs. Keeping it going. Underscoring the divisions among conservatives, Utah Senator John Curtis, a Republican, sounded similar notes to his state's governor Friday on CNN. Somehow, as a society, we need to figure out how to turn down the dial, which I agree. I think the rhetoric of violence we need to remove that from our lexicon. But that's just me. Curtis said, every one of us every morning should wake up and look in the mirror and see what we are doing in our own personal relationships. All right. I don't know what they're doing over there. Oh, that's Westmore. Sorry about that. An outlier, often at odds with Trump. Cox on Friday did not directly address Trump's earlier suggestions of blaming the radical left for Kirk's murder. Yet his words stood in stark contrast to the president's. Despite leading one of the nation's reddest states, Cox has not followed most of the party, aligning himself closely with Trump. Cox supported Marco Rubio in 2016 before switching his endorsement to Ted Cruz and final stretch of the Republican presidential primary. At the time, he said he could not support Trump, saying he does not represent neither goodness nor kindness. And I'm going to say it again. I want to understand what he means by goodness and kindness, because those words can be definitely understood in a lot of different ways. So I don't know if I agree with fully. I want to know what he means by goodness nor kindness, but I digress. A member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Cox, sorry about that, frequently spoke out against Trump's behavior and rhetoric. He built a political brand that extended beyond party labels. I can now I totally see where he's getting his problematic teaching from. He's a Mormon. There we go. In the final stretch of his 2020 campaign for governor, Cox cut an ad with his Democratic opponent in which the two vowed to respect the outcome of the presidential election, and said they wanted Utah to serve as an example for the nation. I mean, I think that's reasonable. It's sad to say that you actually have to have somebody do that, and we're just going to say, hey, we're going to respect whatever happens. I mean, but that's reasonable. I guess I got to see the ad. Do you want to look at the ad? I can see it being problematic, and that's not really where I wanted to go. I just want to go back to my conflict entrepreneurs comment. I'll come back to it. Although we sit in different sides of the aisle, we are both committed to the American civility and peaceful transition of power, Cox said in the ad. Okay. He didn't endorse Trump last year until after the assassination attempt on the then former president's life in Butler, Pennsylvania. Because of the miracle, Cox said, you have an opportunity to do something that no other person on earth can do right now, unify and save our country. No, Christ actually will save our country, but I digress. Cox has spent years urging Americans to embrace a more civil approach to politics and disagreement. I'm right there for you. There's nothing wrong with just saying, hey, we disagree on this, but we don't need to go to fisticuffs. I don't think that's saying too much. As chairman of the National Governors Association, he launched the Disagree Better initiative aimed at encouraging civility. He's filmed videos with Democratic governors to encourage Americans to disagree with each other without vitriol. Okay, I can rock with that. One alongside Colorado Governor Jared Polis featured Cox saying that the two were here to help save your family dinners. Save your family dinners. Although with more featured the two discussing their love for basketball and joking about their own baldness. Politics is important, but it shouldn't define us or destroy our relationships, Cox said in the video. Okay. I mean, I totally agree. I do think that we've made politics unequivocally way more important than it should be in our society. But in all honesty, I do think that I'm not just pointing the finger at one side of the aisle. I do think both sides are guilty, but I do think one side really ratcheted it up. And we talked about this on a previous episode. What party was the one that said, don't invite people to dinner if they voted a certain way, or unfellowship yourself with your church community? Because why? Because they voted a certain way or disagree with you ideologically. That wasn't That wasn't both sides of the aisle. That was one particular side that was doing that, and they need to own that part. Cox and Moore were together last week in a national press conference lunch where they discussed the inevitability of crisis that governors face. Moore's came last March when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. Let me start again. Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. Cox came days after that conversation. Okay, talking about Charlie Kirk. I got you. Moore said that he reached out to Cox as soon as he heard about Kirk's assassination. The two have spoken every day since. I prayed for him, Moore said, and then I just told him, I said, listen, the only thing I ask is just make sure you're taking care of yourself. Excuse me. You're taking care of yourself because your people are going to need you right now. Okay. I mean, log off and go touch some grass. All right, here we go. Cox on Friday also renewed his call for Americans, particularly the nation's youth, to disengage from social media and forge a connection with whom they agree or disagree. You are inheriting a country where politics feels like rage. I can agree with that. It feels like rage is the only option, Cox said. Your generation has the opportunity to build a culture that is very different than what we are suffering through right now, not by pretending differences don't matter, but by embracing our differences and having those hard conversations. Okay. Cox described social media as a cancer and urged those watching to log off, turn off, touch grass, hug a family member, go out and do good in your community. Okay. I can rock with that. That comment won the Utah governor's platitudes from one of the Senate's more liberal and online Democrat voices. Hawaii Senator Brian Schultz posted on X, I know this guy is a Republican and all, but I swear you could win all the electoral votes with this message in 28. Wow. Okay. I don't know about that. That's a little bit That's a little bit much, but okay. All the electoral college? That's saying a lot. Curtis, the Republican senator, said Cox urged Americans to sign off social media was one of the wisest things I think he said today. Cox also drew praise from conservative media outlets for highlighting of Utah's reaction to Kirk's death. There was no rioting. There was no looting. Look, you know why? Because we don't do that. That's not us. I'm just going to say that. That's not our response mechanism. Our de facto response to something that's traumatic like that is not to go burn down cities. That's just not going to be the case. That's not us. That's not what we do. There was no looting. There were no cars set on fire. There was no violence. There were vigils and prayers and people coming together to share humanity. He said, amen. I agree with him, even though, yeah, that's right on the money. That's not our brand is not to riot. More often mentioned as a potential 28 Democratic presidential contender himself, said if Cox, who won a hard-fought 2020 gubernatorial primary, wants to run for the White House, he shouldn't be underestimated. Anyone who thinks that his message could not resonate in the Republican Party, I think you're underestimating the hunger this country has for unified leadership. That's very interesting hearing that from a Democrat. For a person who brings us together rather than tearing us apart, Moore said. And I think you're also underestimating Spencer Cox. Okay. All right. I just thought that was super interesting. I did leave the link down here, and I thought his commentary about conflict entrepreneurs was just spot on the money. It was right there, right in the pocket, because that's exactly what we have. We have conflict entrepreneurs that are literally making merchandise of us and our conflicts and our grievances. And I got one more I want to look at. I got an actual video now I want to look at, and then I want to get out of here. By the way, shout out to Sprosky in the building. The virtue signaling culture has corrupted any kind of actual cents. Thank you so much. I appreciate you stopping by. Louis in the building. Thank you so much. Salute to you. Look at Mind Brew. Became a member. What's going on? Thank you so much, Victoria. Good morning to you. Thank you. I see you over there, President Not Perfect. Oh, Q says she pointing them fingers. Good morning to you, love. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Got something for you. I'm going to jump over here real quick to Decoy Voice. And he brought up a great point today. Shout out to Decoy Voice, fantastic content creator over in California. And he had a great approach on this today. And I thought it was well worth it. I'm not going to be super long. So I'm going to just jump in here real quick and let Decoy Voice tease it out and tell us what he's got going on his mind. So let me get out of the way. Hey, there you go. Trisha, good morning to you. I'm glad that you made it. Glad we caught you or you caught us, either way. All right, let's go see what Decoy is talking about this morning. Let's go.
The memory of Charlie revolution all across America, but I had no idea he'd have such an impact in the UK, all the way down to marches in Australia and back up to movements in South Korea, where ironically this reminds me of those recent riots in France 4 days ago where the far left burned a Korean restaurant in protest of French leadership, as these concurrent protests just highlight the key differences between the left and the right. As reportedly, this TikTok was about Charlie.
The best part of this whole thing is that he is not martyr material, so his death will mean nothing. It will activate no one. It will impact few. It's just great.
Completely oblivious to the vigils hitting college campuses, with huge crowds even in New York City, as NASCAR races paid their respects. But also MLB games, as the New York Yankees had a moment of silence alongside the NFL, also honoring his life. But then we started seeing Spain paying their respects. Marches all the way in Australia holding up signs for Charlie, with South Korean citizens singing, "We are Charlie Kirk." Where we all knew the assassination of Charlie Kirk was going to ignite American conservatives and moderates, but nobody could have imagined he would become the face of freedom for the entire planet. As at the UK's Unite the Kingdom March, which was reported as 110,000 people, but was more likely millions.
Look at that.
This is the counter-revolution. There's been a globalist revolution for 20 years. We are the counter-revolution. It's not going anywhere, mate.
Carrying posters of not only Charlie Kirk, but his entire family, as they all rallied behind his memory.
To Charlie's family, we all pray for you, and we hope we honor his life.
Wow.
So, of course, the left tried to make this about the spooky far-right.
What you're seeing here is probably the biggest far-right demonstration ever held in Britain. And I've been among this crowd, and I think it's obvious that many of the people here wearing our flag as a badge of their own white identity and as a mark of hatred of our multicultural, multinational society.
But who knew the UK's far-right was so diverse?
Erica Kirk, this is for you. We love you. We stand with you. We will always have your back. And we love your husband, Charlie.
I have to come and support the event, uniting the whole country, bringing everybody together, bringing the 4 nations together. That's why I dress up and then come and support. I'll be integrated, so I have to respect the culture.
And notice how nobody was shouting down any of those very diverse conservatives, as they're all embracing Western culture and rejecting liberal tyranny. But nothing scares a political elite more than when the common man bands together against the ruling class. So they immediately went back to their same old tired playbook of protesters that mysteriously get these signs left behind by these mysterious figures, who they later discovered are funded by none other than their own tax dollars. Kinda interesting how the same exact thing was happening in the US until the Trump administration started tracing who was funding these riots, and they evaporated overnight. So of course, to offset millions of angry Englishmen, masked Antifa and Black Bloc had to make an appearance, chanting disgusting phrases.
This is for all the people that want to be here on our side.
Where their coppers initially admitted the problem areas weren't with the Unite the Kingdom marchers, but the Antifa idiots, to which the Met Police marched them right into each other, just so they could later state there was significant aggression directed at officers by the Unite the Kingdom protesters, but also turning off the replies, as the mainstream media rushed to echo those sentiments, stating far-right activists with clashes breaking out.
Marching through the streets of London, one of the largest right-wing demonstrations to take place in the UK in modern times. Organized by the far-right anti-immigration activist Tommy Robinson, close by a much smaller counter-protest organized by anti-racism activists.
I'm just really against racism.
So close at one point that right-wing marchers began throwing things at them and pushing police.
London's Metropolitan Police said a number of its officers were assaulted by the right-wing demonstrators, Dorica, and that 25 people were arrested.
It really seems like every single time they start to lose control, they revert back to the same exact plays. As in this enormous march across the UK, I didn't see a single incident of property damage, compared to neighboring France that had their own riots 4 days earlier, as it initially started with the French angry at their political leadership. But then, women carrying French flags were being attacked by those not, with the Lock Everything protests beginning to build barricades in the street, making makeshift roadblocks to stop traffic.
That is the craziest thing I've ever seen. They are literally building, they have cement and cinder blocks and are literally making a wall in the street. That's the that is some extra crazy stuff right there. I've never seen anything like that. Like they're literally building a wall in the middle of the street. I thought we were bad here in Atlanta, but that's crazy.
Everything protests beginning to build barricades in the street, making makeshift roadblocks to stop traffic.
That's ignorant.
And then burning buses to stop the streets. As sadly, that wasn't the only place they used fire on the freeways, as they specifically burned a Korean restaurant, later attacking the responding French police with trash cans. But the mainstream media didn't seem to cover it like the Unite the Kingdom rally, where they seemed to make it more about pressure on the government and how it started online in far-right circles, but now happens to have left-wing groups. So when the left burns down entire sections of the city, they're protesters in Paris. But if the entire community marches against the establishment, that's the far-right clashing with the police. But they only classify you as far-right, so they can later call you a fascist, as they simultaneously encourage psychos online. They need to eliminate these evil fascists. But now, normal people no longer fear being called a fascist when they just murdered Charlie Kirk over allegedly being one, when all he was doing was having conversations and spreading the truth. And the more the left goes into overdrive trying to silence anybody that notices, the more the average citizen is finally saying no to their political violence. So as the calls for political violence have only amplified, people are now losing their jobs in neurology at universities. Microsoft is combing through their ranks to do the same, and even American Airlines is firing pilots who think it's okay to celebrate murder, as we're seeing a turning point not only in the US, with Americans making it their mission to dish out consequences, but now conservatives worldwide are rallying behind Charlie, as the left didn't even think he'd be seen as a martyr, but now Charlie's known globally as the face of finally fighting back. So if you appreciate my concise, sometimes lighthearted commentary on the tragic status that is today's reality, subscribe to Decoy Voice.
I appreciate Decoy Voice for sure. I'm gonna drop that link in the chat as well if you want to check out if you want to check that video out, and I'll make sure I add it to the description of this video as also. All right, everybody. I just wanted to do that very quickly and talk about conflict entrepreneurs. I believe this week is going to be pivotal. I believe we're going to hear a lot. We're going to find out more about the gentleman that shot. We're going to hear more conspiracies. We're going to hear all more of this. And I do think it's necessary for us to remember these people want us to be at each other's throats. They want us to fight one another. And I think we do not only ourselves a better service, but we do those people around the world that are watching us. We do them a great service by being mindful, being measured, not being pulled into the trick bag of conflict, but to continue to push back against the serious efforts to make us fight one another so that other people can enrich themselves. All right, let's keep it going. That was a great clip. Jason, gotta check Decoy voice out for sure. Oh, absolutely. Fantastic. I don't know why I've found or how I found him, but he just has such a great take on pretty much all the different topics going on. So shout out to Decoy for sure. All right, what we got here? Now I did, it looks like a lot of good conversation going on in the chat. I don't want to keep y'all long because I'm supposed to be being productive today. So I want to say again, thank y'all so much. Tonight, there's tentatively, y'all keep your eyes out. A couple of content creators and myself, we're going to hop on probably at 8 o'clock tonight, Eastern Standard Time, and talk about what is the Black response, how are Black people responding to Charlie Kirk and some of the things Charlie Kirk said, but even more importantly, Charlie Kirk's life. So we'll be talking about that tonight, 8 o'clock. As soon as we get the confirmation, I'll make sure I put that up. I do want to say thank you all so much for supporting the channel. As always, thank you for liking the videos and sharing and commenting, all that kind of stuff like that. It does mean a lot. I'm glad that you're finding value in it. So please keep me posted on more things that you think I should talk about or you'll be interested in me discussing. So I really do thank y'all so much for that. I'm going to get over here and get some work done. So until next time, everybody, grace and peace. Take care. Have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Jay Witt Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do me a favor and hit me up with that 3-piece special. Like the video, subscribe, and of course, share it with somebody who would also enjoy this type of content. And make sure you leave a comment because I do pin the best comments to the top. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And until next time, everybody, grace and peace.